Welcome to the Life Brand Management Podcast with your girl, Brittany, aka BC Starks, aka your manifesting mentor. And I'm back with another episode of this podcast. And interestingly enough, I want to talk about a subject that has been a theme for me lately. And it's the theme of being the observer as you are disidentifying with old programs. And I don't necessarily have any bulleted points that I want to talk about. This theme keeps coming up for me. So I guess this podcast episode will be an unfolding of sorts as I just unpack some of what I'm observing and some of what I am becoming aware of along my journey. And so I've been just tuned in with paying attention to how I am growing different, how I am changing daily from some of my experiences in my day-to-day life, especially as I've talked about in previous podcasts, when opposites are appearing in my reality, and just being aware and conscious of how I'm now, instead of initially reacting, which sometimes that does happen. I do mention that sometimes the initial reaction is a knee-jerk response. It's a practice behavior to when these kind of circumstances spring up. How do you act? How do you behave? It comes up in thought, and then what I'm finding is that I'm growing more in my observation of the thoughts than I am with going with the emotions or going with the thoughts that come up initially. I don't know if that made any sense as I'm saying it, but what I mean is, like, as circumstances arise, I'm noticing that even if I have a knee-jerk reaction, there's a part of me that's able to zoom out and say, okay, what do I really think about this? What do I know about my journey so far? What do I know about creation and reality creation and my role in that? And with what I know, do I really feel the same ways that I used to feel about these scenarios? Is there a higher way of seeing this scenario? And of course, the answer to that question is always yes. There's always a higher way to see the scenario. And so I allow myself to go with exploring and unpacking the higher ways of seeing the scenario. And so what that does is that pulls me back from spiraling with thoughts because of the familiar, because of maybe past stories that I have. If I'm experiencing opposites, usually there's some past stories that you have that bring you back to the past and somehow try to convince you that, see, this is what life is. This is how it always has been. So this is what it's going to be. Look at this thing showing up again. Like, sometimes your subconscious will allow those kind of thoughts to swirl. And this is why people feel stuck and stagnant, and part of a cycle that no longer serves them, but they don't know how to get out. And what I'm learning is that the way out is literally to be the observer. Be the observer of the experience. Be the observer of your thoughts about the experience. Be the observer of the corresponding emotions that you feel in regards to the experience. And as you do that, what you'll realize is that there's a gap between what has been familiar and who you find yourself to be now. Because what you'll notice is that you have this higher thinking and you're starting to see it from a higher mind. So you realize that it's not permanent. And so you don't have to feel so intensely about it. And this changes how you then allow yourself to exist once you come to that realization, like, this isn't a permanent situation. This isn't going to have to dictate how I'm seeing myself now, because I understand that there's a higher way to view this, a higher perspective. I'm able to reframe. And that is where your power lies, in your ability to observe and then separate the truth of who you are from the experiences of your past, because you're no longer identifying with that version of yourself. You understand that it was just a program, and you no longer have to be the program. You can be the person who previously experienced that program and who sometimes will re-encounter the program, but you don't have to be the person who is the program, who can't shake the program, right? Because that higher thinking is making you aware that there's another way to exist, and you're going to allow yourself the space to explore possibility, right? And if possibility is infinite, then that means that if your default, or if your program is used to thinking the worst case scenario because of what you've experienced in the past, or fearing that the worst is going to happen again because of what you've experienced in the past, or even just your fear of the unknown, instead of that, you'll let your thoughts drift to possibility, and hopefully possibility of the best case scenario. I just had a conversation about that earlier today, like learning how to get rid of catastrophic thinking, because that is what keeps us in suffrage. That is what keeps us in bondage. That is what keeps us experiencing cycles of low emotion. When we think in catastrophic ways, where our minds naturally race to the worst case scenario. Now, mind you, there's some programming in our society, in our media, and the information that we take in on the daily that perpetuates this cycle. But that's also why it's important to incorporate things like a mental diet. I forget the author, but if you go on YouTube, you can find, when you type in the word 7-day mental diet, where it's like this. Again, please pardon me for not knowing the name of the author right now, because it's fairly new to me. But the practice itself is not new, but the author's name is new. But what he talks about is just like minding your thoughts, minding the content you consume, minding what you're reinforcing. You don't want to reinforce catastrophic thinking. You don't want to reinforce the worst case scenario. Instead, you want to reinforce possibility and hopefully the best case scenario. What's the best thing that could happen out of this situation? Like, let your mind and your imagination roam free in that direction. And what you'll find is that you'll ease up some of the tension or the negative emotions that you're experiencing, because you allow your imagination to conceive goodness instead of things that make you feel fearful. And that in and of itself is a game changer, right? Like, we want to use our imagination for endless possibilities of good, not just for catastrophic, and hopefully not at all for catastrophic worst case scenario thinking. Now, mind you, you do want to be prepared for whatever in life, but hopefully you're preparing for the best and not always the worst, because think about what that means in terms of how you've been existing. If you're always gearing up for battle, if you're always gearing up for the worst case scenario, it's almost like you don't leave room to welcome goodness, right? And in life, we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So if you're always prepared for battle, you're always on the defense, you're always looking for the worst, you literally cannot even recognize good, even if it slapped you in the face, because you're not conditioned to recognize it. You've been conditioned to recognize the bad. And so that's what your thoughts will naturally go to, no matter who you're dealing with, no matter what the circumstance is. And so our job in this intentional creation journey is to learn how to exist in a way that's more favorable and more in alignment with our highest ideals and our highest desires. And that means that we have to rid ourselves, or at least diminish, the conditioning of catastrophe. We have to diminish the conditioning of looking forward to the bad news. We have to condition ourselves to lessen or diminish expecting or assuming the worst of others. That's not a way to welcome what it is we truly desire. It's actually the opposite, because again, we attract what we are and what we expect, not what we desire. And I keep saying that I don't want to harp too much on the word desire or want, but we don't welcome what we choose, we welcome what we are. And so hopefully, in doing the work of becoming more of the observer, you're giving yourself the opportunity to recognize who you've been, and then make a choice as to who you want to be moving forward. Because once you make that choice of who you want to be, then no matter what you're faced with, that new identity is going to bring forth certain thoughts and ideas and emotions, which will inspire certain actions that are going to be more in alignment with what you want, because you're choosing who you want to be. And again, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And if you're choosing what you want to be, then what you are creating and attracting will be done intentionally, on purpose. That is the core of what it means to be an intentional creator. Again, I had no notes for this episode. It's just a theme that has visited me, and I've had some really amazing realizations as it relates to this theme, and I'm starting to really get the hang of this process of being the observer and embracing my change and no longer associating with parts of my conditioning or program that no longer serve me. It's becoming, I don't want to sugarcoat this, but it's becoming easier, I think. In the beginning, it felt hard and heavy to change. But as I'm growing in my understanding of self, and I'm practicing using my tools to shift, I'm finding it less of a battle. And I'm finding that I'm growing in my practice so much that it now is starting to feel more like a natural state of existing, where I'm just observing. I don't react. I'm observing. And if I do react, I give myself space to blow some steam, and then I observe, and then I make a choice of who I'm going to continue to be. And those choices, or that one choice, inspires everything else. Like, the subconscious does its work and draws in the right opportunities, answered prayers, favorable outcomes. All of the above seem to flow in my life when I return to the choice. My definite aim, as Neville likes to say, my chief aim, when I return to that aim, that goal of what I'm aligning with, and deciding who I need to be in alignment with that, and shifting into that identity, I'm noticing there's so much more flow in my life. And so, let me know if any of this resonates with you, if you can identify with what I'm speaking of in terms of being the observer and choosing the new programming and the new conditioning. Another thing I talked about, or I came across a message earlier, and I think I did a YouTube short that talked about the importance of frequency. Once you are the observer and you've you're practicing being the observer and you're deciding who you want to be, the key is going to be frequency, because that's what fuses the new identity. That's what fuses the new conditioning. It solidifies it. It makes it second nature. It makes it natural to where you're no longer eventually going to have to practice it, because you've been being it for so long that becomes the new program. So, yeah, like I'm getting the hang of this thing in my own world. And I just wanted to share it here because, again, this is a journey that is to be shared. I am demonstrating, which is why I call myself a manifesting mentor. I'm being a doer of the word and instead of just a hearer. And so my testimony is because of my actual experience. And so thank you so much for tuning in. As this message has been brought to you, just know that it came to you because there's a divine purpose. There's a divine reason why you are needing to hear it right now at this moment. And I am your divine teacher, so to speak, of this particular aspect of the journey. So, tap in with me. Until next time, toodles.